Why did Siddhartha Gautama, born into a life of luxury and royalty, decide to abandon all his worldly comforts and embark on a profound spiritual journey? When and where did this transformation take place, and how did it ultimately lead to his becoming the Buddha, the Enlightened One? Let's explore this extraordinary journey of Siddhartha Gautama to enlightened Buddha and the profound impact it had on the world. I will explain each in depth, so watch patiently but do not skip. Before beginning, we should know that Buddha's father's name, King Suddhodana. Buddha's mother name, Queen Maya Devi. Buddha's stepmother name, Mahapajapati Gautami. Buddha's wife name, Yasodhara. Buddha's son name, Rahula. Buddha's cousin, mother's side, name, Devadatta. Buddha's cousin, stepmother's side, name, Nanda. Buddha's maternal uncle or father-in-law, Suppabutta. Buddha, also called Siddhartha Gautama. Buddha, the light of Asia. There was a state in Kosala Desh. The ruler of this state was King Suddhodana, who ruled from the capital, Kapilavastu, western region of Nepal. He married Princess Maya Devi, who was the daughter of King Supra Buddha, who ruled the state of Devadatta, Rapandahi district in the Terai region of Nepal. Maya Devi was a very virtuous and talented princess apart from her great beauty. King Suddhodana ruled the state righteously and was loved and respected by all. Queen Maya Devi, as was the tradition, which is still observed in some eastern countries, Queen Maya Devi traveled to her parents' home in Devadatta for her first confinement. She was taken in a great procession with thousands of attendants. On the way, she stopped at Lumbini, Terai plains of southern Nepal, which was a beautiful and shady grove of sal trees, to admire the surroundings and rest a while. It was Vesak, the day of the full moon in the month of May, and the queen got labor pains and gave birth to a baby boy under a sal tree. This is how Gautama Buddha was born. The place of his birth was a grove known as Lumbini, near the city of Kapilavastu, at the foot of Mount Palpa in the Himalayan ranges within Nepal. This small city Kapilavastu stood on the bank of the little river Rohini, some 100 miles northeast of the city of Varanasi. People say that this baby walked 7 steps as soon as he was born. On the ground, each step was welcomed by a lotus flower that sprouted from the earth. While standing on the last lotus, he proclaimed to the world that he would be the greatest and the noblest being on the earth, and that this would be his last birth. People talked about many other extraordinary aspects of Buddha's life, but I won't mention those. The procession that took Maya Devi to her parents turned back and returned to Kapilavastu with the newborn baby. King Suddhodana received them halfway with great joy. After the baby was born, the king invited 5 renowned Brahmins for the naming and to see his son's future. After examining the marks on the body of the infant, they said that to its father Suddhodana, the child, on attaining manhood, would become either a universal monarch or, abandoning house and home, would assume the robe of a monk and become a Buddha, a perfectly enlightened soul, for the salvation of mankind. Then the king said, "What shall my son see to make him retire from the world?" The astrologer replied, "4 signs." "What for?" asked the king. "A decrepit old man, a diseased man, a dead man, and a monk. These 4 will make the prince retire from the world," replied the astrologers. King Suddhodana thought that he might lose his precious son and tried his level best to make him attached to earthly objects. He surrounded him with all kinds of luxury and indulgence, to retain his attachment to pleasures of the senses and prevent him from undertaking a vow of solitariness and poverty. Since his family surname name was Gautama, the prince was called Siddhartha Gautama. After 7 days of Prince Siddhartha's birth, Queen Maya Devi passed away. The infant prince was brought up by his mother's sister Prajapati Gautami, who became the consort of King Suddhodana after Maya Devi's death. On the 5th month of Prince Siddartha, the royal sowing feast was held at the royal paddy fields. The baby prince too was taken to the fields and was kept in a tent under a tree. The attendants came out of the tent to watch the feast. After a while, when they peeped inside the tent to see whether the baby was all right, they were astonished to see him meditating. The king was informed of this, and for the second time, King Suddhodana paid reverence to his son. King Suddhodana gave all the comforts in life to his son abundantly and a good education as fitting to a king. Prince Siddartha learnt everything very fast, and even his relatives were doubtful of his learning ability since it was too brief. The prince had to prove his skills to them in a public demonstration, which won him his consort Princess Yasodhara, a cousin of his. King Suddhodana did everything in his power to prevent his son being attracted towards a religious life. He got him married and put him in a walled place with gardens, fountains, palaces, music, dances, etc. Countless charming young ladies attended to Siddartha to make him cheerful and happy. In particular, the king wanted to keep away from Siddartha the 4 signs which would move him to enter into the ascetic life. But one day, on one of their rare strolls, the prince hard-pressed his faithful attendant Channa, who was following the king's instructions to the letter and prevented the prince from going outside the city walls alone all these years, to take him out of the city. All the visits to the outside of the city by the prince had been pre-planned before. Channa knew he was in great danger if the king knew. But, after much deliberation, he took the prince outside the city walls, and for the first time, the prince saw an old person trudging on the road. Pathetically. The prince learned from Channa that everybody would become old one day. On Prince Siddartha's next visit outside the walls of the city, he encountered a sick person who was lamenting with pain and learnt from Channa that everybody gets sick one time or another. The prince encountered a funeral on his 3rd visit outside the city gates and learnt that everybody dies and it is inevitable. On his 4th visit outside the city, he saw a yellow-robed ascetic walking calmly with his head bent. From Channa he learnt that those are the ones who have renounced the lay life for a peaceful living, rid of all worldly desires, seeking to end suffering in the world. This explanation captivated the prince immensely. He was in great thoughts on the way back when he learnt that his wife had given birth to a son. Hearing the news, the prince uttered, "Rahula was born, bringing an attachment to life." Hearing his son's words from others, King Suddhodana named his grandson Rahula. The prince entered the palace to the music and dancing of the court women. But he was not interested in them anymore. He fell asleep contemplating about the reality of life. When he suddenly woke up at midnight, he saw the reality much better. All the young beauties who were entertaining him from the previous night have fallen asleep all over the place. Some were groaning and snoring, some were discharging saliva, some were half naked, and some were grinding their teeth in sleep. The prince then and there made up his mind to depart the lay life and go in search of deliverance. He just sneaked a quick look at his newborn son, who was sleeping cuddled to his mother, and walked out of the palace with Channa and his well-trained horse, Kanthaka, never to return to the comfortable palace life. Prince Siddartha was 29 years old, and it was an Esala full moon day. This is called the Great Renunciation, since he left all the worldly comforts and riches to find the end of suffering, which was a very difficult task. Just a short recap. Buddha's original name was Siddhartha. It meant one who had accomplished his aim. Gautama was Siddhartha's family name. Siddartha was known all over the world as Buddha, the Enlightened. Siddartha spent his boyhood at Kapilavastu and its vicinity. He was married at the age of 16. His wife's name was Yasodhara. Siddartha had a son named Rahula. At the age of 29, Siddhartha Gautama suddenly abandoned his home to devote himself entirely to spiritual pursuits and yogic practices. A mere accident turned him to the path of renunciation. One day he managed, somehow or the other, to get out of the walled enclosure of the palace and roamed about in the town along with his servant Channa to see how the people were getting on. The sight of a decrepit old man, a sick man, a corpse and a monk finally induced Siddartha to renounce the world. He felt that he also would become a prey to old age, disease and death. Also, he noticed the serenity and the dynamic personality of the monk. Let me go beyond the miseries of this worldly life by renouncing this world of miseries and sorrows. This mundane life, with all its luxuries and comforts, is absolutely worthless. I also am subject to decay and am not free from the effect of old age. Worldly happiness is transitory. Gautama left forever his home, wealth, dominion, power, father, wife and the only child. He shaved his head and put on yellow robes. Now let's move towards story. He marched towards Rajgriha, the capital of the kingdom of Magadha. There were many caves in the neighboring hills. Many hermits lived in those caves. Siddhartha took Alamo Kalamo, a hermit, as his first teacher. He was not satisfied with his instructions. He left him and sought the help of another recluse named Uddako Ramputo for spiritual instructions. At last he determined to undertake yogic practices. He practiced severe tapas, austerities, and pranayama, practice of breath control, for 6 years. He determined to attain the supreme peace by practicing self-mortification. He abstained almost entirely from taking food. He did not find much progress by adopting this method. He was reduced to a skeleton. He became exceedingly weak. At that moment, some dancing girls were passing that way singing joyfully as they played on their guitar. Buddha heard their song and found real help in it. The song the girls sang had no real deep meaning for them, but for Buddha it was a message full of profound spiritual significance. It was a spiritual pick-me-up to take him out of his despair and infuse power, strength and courage. The song was, "Fair goes the dancing when the sitar is tuned. Tune us the sitar neither low nor high. And we will dance away the hearts of men. The string overstretched breaks, the music dies. The string overslack is dumb and the music dies. Tune us the sitar neither low nor high." Buddha realized then that he should not go to extremes in torturing the body by starvation and that he should adopt the golden mean or the happy medium or the middle path by avoiding extremes. Then he began to eat food in moderation. He gave up the earlier extreme practices and took to the middle path. Enlightenment. Once Buddha was in a dejected mood as he did not succeed in his yogic practices. He knew not where to go and what to do. A village girl noticed his sorrowful face. She approached him and said to him in a polite manner, "Revered sir, may I bring some food for you? It seems you are very hungry." Gautama looked at her and said, "What is your name, my dear sister?" The maiden answered, "Venerable sir, my name is Sujata." Gautama said, "Sujata, I am very hungry. Can you really appease my hunger?" The innocent Sujata did not understand Gautama. Gautama was spiritually hungry. He was thirsting to attain supreme peace and self-realization. He wanted spiritual food. Sujata placed some food before Gautama and entreated him to take it. Gautama smiled and said, "Beloved Sujata, I am highly pleased with your kind and benevolent nature. Can this food appease my hunger?" Sujata replied, "Yes sir, it will appease your hunger. Kindly take it now." Gautama began to eat the food underneath the shadow of a large tree, thenceforth to be called as the great Bodhi tree or the tree of wisdom. Gautama sat in a meditative mood underneath the tree from early morning to sunset, with a fiery determination and an iron resolve, "Let me die. Let my body perish. Let my flesh dry up. I will not get up from this seat till I get full illumination." He plunged himself into deep meditation. At night he entered into deep samadhi, superconscious state, underneath that sacred Bodhi tree, peepal tree or ficus religiosa. He was tempted by Maya in a variety of ways, but he stood adamant. He did not yield to Maya's allurements and temptations. After spending 49 days sitting under a Bodhi tree meditating, Siddhartha Gautama became Buddha. He had finally reached enlightenment. He came out victorious with full illumination. He attained Nirvana, liberation. His face shone with divine splendor and effulgence. He got up from his seat and danced in divine ecstasy for 7 consecutive days and nights around the sacred Bodhi tree. Then he came to the normal plane of consciousness. His heart was filled with profound mercy and compassion. He wanted to share what he had with humanity. He traveled all over India and preached his doctrine and gospel. He became a savior, deliverer, and redeemer. Buddha gave out the experiences of his samadhi. I thus behold my mind released from the defilement of earthly existence, released from the defilement of sensual pleasures, released from the defilement of heresy, released from the defilement of ignorance. In the emancipated state arose the knowledge, I am emancipated, rebirth is extinct, the religious walk is accomplished, what had to be done is done, and there is no need for the present existence. I have overcome all foes, I am all-wise, I am free from stains in every way, I have left everything and have obtained emancipation by the destruction of desire. Myself having gained knowledge, whom should I call my master? I have no teacher, no one is equal to me. I am the Holy One in this world, I alone am the Absolute Omniscient One, Sambuddho. I have gained coolness by the extinction of all passion and have obtained Nirvana. To find the kingdom of law I go to the city of Varanasi. I will beat the drum of immortality in the darkness of this world. Lord Buddha then walked on to Varanasi. He entered the Deer Park one evening. He gave his discourse there and preached his doctrine. He preached to all without exception, men and women, the high and the low, the ignorant and the learned, all alike. All his first disciples were laymen and 2 of the very first were women. The first convert was a rich young man named Yasa. The next were Yasa's father, mother and wife. Those were his lay disciples. Buddha argued and debated with his old disciples who had deserted him when he was in the Urovala forest. He brought them round by his powerful arguments and persuasive powers. Kondano, an aged hermit, was converted first. The others also soon accepted the doctrine of Lord Buddha. Buddha made 60 disciples and sent them in different directions to preach his doctrine. Buddha told his disciples not to inquire into the origin of the world, into the existence and nature of God. He said to them that such investigations were practically useless and likely to distract their minds. Spreading the doctrine. The number of Buddha's followers gradually increased. Nobles, Brahmins and many wealthy men became his disciples. Buddha paid no attention to caste. The poor and the outcasts were admitted to his order. Those who wanted to become full members of his order were obliged to become monks and to observe strict rules of conduct. Buddha had many lay disciples also. Those lay members had to provide for the wants of the monks. In the forest of Urovala, there were 3 brothers, all very famous monks and philosophers. They had many learned disciples. They were honored by kings and potentates. Lord Buddha went to Urovala and lived with those 3 monks. He converted those 3 reputed monks, which caused a great sensation all over the country. Lord Buddha and his disciples walked on towards Rajgriha, the capital of Magadha. Bimbisara, the king, who was attended upon by 120,000 Brahmins and householders, welcomed Buddha and his followers with great devotion. He heard the sermon of Lord Buddha and at once became his disciple. 110,000 of the Brahmins and householders became full members of Lord Buddha's order and the remaining 10,000 became lay adherents. Buddha's followers were treated with contempt when they went to beg for their daily food. Bimbisara made Buddha a present of Valuvanam, a bamboo grove, one of the royal pleasure gardens near his capital. Lord Buddha spent many rainy seasons there with his followers. Every Buddhist monk takes a vow, when he puts on a yellow robe, to abstain from killing any living being. Therefore, a stay in one place during the rainy season becomes necessary. Even now, the Paramahamsa sannyasins, the highest class of renunciates, of Sankara's order stay in one place for 4 months during the rainy season. It is impossible to move about in the rainy season without killing countless small insects, which the combined influence of moisture and the hot sun during the season brings into existence. Lord Buddha received from his father a message asking him to visit his native place, so that he might see him once more before he died. Buddha accepted his invitation gladly and started for Kapilavastu. He stayed in a forest outside the city. His father and relatives came to see him, but they were not pleased with their ascetic Gautama. They left the place after a short time. They did not make any arrangement for his and his followers' daily food. After all, they were worldly people. Buddha went to the city and begged his food from door to door. This news reached the ears of his father. He tried to stop Gautama from begging. Gautama said, "O king, I am a mendicant, I am a monk. It is my duty to get alms from door to door. This is the duty of the order. Why do you stop this? The food that is obtained from alms is very pure." His father did not pay any attention to the words of Gautama. He snatched the bowl from his hand and took him to his palace. All came to pay Buddha their respects, but his wife Yasodhara did not come. She said, "He himself will come to me, if I am of any value in his eyes." She was a very chaste lady endowed with viveka, discrimination, vairagya, dispassion, and other virtuous qualities. From the day she lost her husband she gave up all her luxuries. She took very simple food once daily and slept on a mat. She led a life of severe austerities. Gautama heard all this. He was very much moved. He went at once to see her. She prostrated at his feet. She caught hold of his feet and burst into tears. Buddha established an order of female ascetics. Yasodhara became the first of the Buddhistic nuns. Yasodhara pointed out the passing Buddha to her son through a window and said, "O Rahula, that monk is your father. Go to him and ask for your birthright. Tell him boldly, I am your son. Give me my heritage." Rahula at once went up to Buddha and said, "Dear father, give me my heritage." Buddha was taking his food then. He did not give any reply. The boy repeatedly asked for his heritage. Buddha went to the forest. The boy also silently followed him to the forest. Buddha said to one of his disciples, "I give this boy the precious spiritual wealth I acquired under the sacred Bodhi tree. I make him the heir to that wealth." Rahula was initiated into the order of monks. When this news reached the ears of Buddha's father, he was very much grieved because after losing his son, he now lost his grandson also. Ananda, one of Buddha's cousins, was one of the principal early disciples of Buddha and was a most devoted friend and disciple of Buddha. He was devoted to Buddha with a special fervor in a simple childlike way and served him as his personal attendant till the end of his life. He was very popular. He was a very sweet man with pleasant ways. He had no intellectual attainments, but he was a man of great sincerity and loving nature. Devadatta, one of Ananda's brothers, was also in the order. Devadatta became Buddha's greatest rival and tried hard to oust Buddha and occupy the place himself. Now let us know how many times Devadatta, cousin of Buddha, tried to kill Buddha and then what happened. Devadatta was the son of King Suppabutta and his wife Pamita, who was an aunt of the Buddha. Devadatta's sister was Yasodhara, making him both a cousin and brother-in-law of the Buddha. Together with Ananda and other Sakyan princes, he entered the order of monks in the early part of the Buddha's ministry, but was unable to attain any stage of sainthood and so worked hard for the worldly psychic powers. In his early days, he was a good monk known for his grace and psychic powers. Later he became conceited with worldly gain and fame. As his ill will and jealousy towards the Buddha increased, he became the greatest personal enemy of the Buddha. One day in a large assembly, which included kings and princes, Devadatta approached the Buddha and asked him to make him the leader of the Sangha. Since he was not capable and worthy enough, the Buddha turned down this request. Devadatta became very angry as a result and vowed to take revenge on the Buddha. Although Devadatta was an evil monk, he had many admirers and followers. One of his chief supporters was King Ajatasattu, with whom he discussed his anger and plots for revenge. Together they planned to kill King Ajatasattu's father and rival, King Bimbisara, and Devadatta's enemy, the Buddha. Ajatasattu succeeded in killing his father, but Devadatta failed to kill the Buddha. His first attempt to kill the Buddha was to hire a man to kill the Blessed One. The plan was that the man be killed by 2 other men who would in turn be killed by 4 other men. Finally the 4 men would be killed by 8 other men. But when the first man came close to the Buddha, he became frightened. He put aside his weapons and took refuge in the Buddha. Eventually all the men who were hired to kill one another became disciples of the Buddha, and the cunning plan failed. Then Devadatta himself tried to kill the Buddha. When the Buddha was walking on the Vulture's Rock, Devadatta climbed to the peak and hurled a huge stone at the Buddha. On its way down, the rock struck another rock and a splinter flew and wounded the Buddha's foot, causing blood to flow. The Buddha looked up and seeing Devadatta, he remarked with pity, "Foolish man, you have done many unwholesome deeds for harming the Buddha." Devadatta's third attempt to kill the Blessed One was to make the fierce man-killer elephant, Nalajirai, drunk with liquor. When Nalajirai saw the Buddha coming at a distance, it raised its ears, tail and trunk and charged at him. As the elephant came close, the Buddha radiated his loving kindness, metta, towards the elephant. So vast and deep was the Buddha's love that as the elephant reached the Buddha, it stopped, became quiet and stood before the master. The Buddha then stroked Nalajirai on the trunk and spoke softly. Respectfully, the elephant removed the dust at the master's feet with its trunk, and scattered the dust over its own head. Then it retreated, with its head facing the Buddha, as far as the stable, and remained fully tamed. Usually elephants are tamed with whips and weapons, but the Blessed One tamed the elephant with the power of his loving kindness. Still trying to be the leader of the Sangha, Devadatta tried yet another plan, a deceitful one. With the help of 500 misled monks, he planned to split the Sangha community. He requested the Buddha to make it compulsory for monks to follow 5 extra rules. I. Dwell all their lives in the forest. 2. Live only on alms obtained by begging. 3. Wear robes made from rags collected from the dust heaps and cemeteries. 4. Live at the foot of trees. V. Refrain from eating fish or meat throughout their lives. Devadatta made this request, knowing full well that the Buddha would refuse it. Devadatta was happy that the Buddha did not approve of the 5 rules, and he used these issues to gain supporters and followers. Newly ordained monks who did not know the Dharma well left the Buddha and accepted Devadatta as their leader. Eventually, after Venerable Sariputta and Venerable Moggallana had explained the Dharma to them, they went back to the Buddha. After this, evil days fell on Devadatta. He fell very ill at the failure of his plans, and before his death he sincerely regretted his actions, and wanted to see the Buddha before he died. But the fruits of his evil karma had begun to ripen and prevented him from doing so. He grew desperately ill on the way to see the Buddha, near the gate of Jetavana Monastery. But before he died he took refuge in the Buddha. A barber named Upali and a countryman called Anuruddha were admitted into the order. Upali became a distinguished leader of his order. Anuruddha became a Buddhistic philosopher of vast erudition. The death of Buddha. Buddha went to Sravasti, the capital of the kingdom of Kosala. Here a wealthy merchant gave him for residence an extensive and beautiful forest. Buddha spent many rainy seasons there and delivered several grand discourses. Thus Lord Buddha preached his doctrine for over 45 years, traveling from place to place. Buddha died of an illness brought on by some error in diet. He became ill through eating Sukaramadavan, prepared for him by a lady adherent named Kundo. The commentator explains the word as meaning hog's flesh. Subhadhara Bhikshu thinks it means something which wild boars are fond of and says that it has something of the nature of a truffle. Dr. Hoey says that it is not boar's flesh but sukrakanda or hog's root, a bulbous root found chiefly in the jungle and which Hindus eat with great joy. It is a falahar that is eaten on days of fasting. Buddha said to Ananda, "Go Ananda, prepare for me, between twin sal trees, a couch with the head northward. I am exhausted and would like to lie down." A wonderful scene followed. The twin sal trees burst into full bloom although it was not the blossoming season. Those flowers fell on the body of Buddha out of reverence. Divine coral tree flowers and divine sandalwood powders fell from above on Buddha's body out of reverence. Lord Buddha said, "Come now, dear monks. I bid you farewell. Compounds are subject to dissolution. Prosper ye through diligence and work out your salvation. I can die happily. I have not kept a single teaching hidden in a closed hand. Everything that is useful for you, I have already given. Be your own guiding light." The Buddha, while leaving his body at the age of 80,